folks. Welcome back, everybody, to Pirkei, Avos, the ethics of the father, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. This has been just such a wonderful series. We all need to integrate ethics into our lives, put it into practice. He's starting chapter 2, Mishnah 5, episode 10 today. It's been just such a journey. I don't know if there's just so much in there that to unpack, or I need to learn something that the rabbi's really trying to teach me. But nonetheless, it's just always a joy to have him share the light of Torah out of the nation of Israel. So let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing. Rabbi Coffman, you're live on the air. So good to see you. We missed you over the last couple of weeks with Passover.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be here. Passover, at least for us in Israel, is now finished. We have all my little elves packing up my kitchen, putting things. Hopefully when we're done, everything should be sparkling clean. You never know if you're not, if the taskmaster's not there, whipping everybody. So yeah, it was an unbelievable Passover. People out and about in Israel. They say last week there were more than, a couple 100,000 people in parks and, just going out, being able to get out. And, there was,
the weather's
was
nice.
A little bit chilly, a little bit on the nippy side, but it was, the weather was still good. Enough to have a few barbecues, or if you're from South Africa, a couple of braais out there. So, it was a lot of fun. Someone asked me, one of my classes, did I actually see Elijah the prophet? Because I drink so much. On Passover, I finally measured my cup, and my cup is actually, I thought was only 220 grams, which is about 8 ounces, which is actually quite big, and it's really almost 500 grams. So it's, so I went easy on the wine this year than I normally would, because, it's 3 times the amount that a person should really have to drink. Any case, so by the end of the Seder, I had my 2-year-old grandson was still wide awake running around, and his younger brother still up, awake, sleep, awake, my 9-year-old son up,
Wow.
So it was pretty lively, definitely pretty lively, ate all the matzah, drank all the wine, Elijah was there, hope he enjoyed. So we are still in chapter 2, Mishnah 5, and this is actually part 10, which you are correct. Are we going to get to part 11? Most likely. We'll see, because this is a jam-packed Mishnah, which a lot of them are. But, sometimes there's a lot more, certainly to speak about, than others. Remember, last week or a few weeks back, we got all carried away about, about what I think. Right. And about having something in my mind, because when a person says something, you can't just say, well, it was a mistake. I didn't mean to say it. Right. But the reality is it's already there. Right. So we mentioned the Mishnah before. Don't make a statement that is not going to be easily understood on the ground that it will be understood eventually. So what did that mean? Simply, we explained that if a person thinks something, right, it's in their mind, it's part of their psyche, right? What's going to happen? It will come out at some point, right? So, this basketball player, said something negative against the Jews and, slip of the tongue. Well, we went through all that saying there is no such thing as a slip of the tongue. It means it's in your mind. Once it's in your mind, it's part of your psyche. So the thing is, you have to fight like a dog to get it out of your mind, because a person can never make the claim. See, I would always make fun of the CFL, right? And you're going to say, oh, but he didn't really mean it. He's only making fun. But really, maybe there's something deep there. Maybe I actually watched a game or two and said, oh, this is Bush League, right? This is like grade C football, right? That's why Doug Flutie was up there, right? Because he couldn't make it in the NFL, right? Regardless.
He did. He went down to Buffalo.
Right. There is a little bit something, maybe to what we say, that a person can say, oh, it was just a slip of the tongue. Right? So that we spoke about at great length. The last part of the Mishnah over here says, when I am free, I will study. Right? Yeah. For perhaps you are not going to become free. So what would I say? Simple explanation is, a person's going to say, you know what? When I have time, I'll study. Right? But then something comes up. Right? We get delayed. We get, behind on things. We don't take it seriously. So therefore, person's going to say, oh, I had to do this. I had to do that. I had to do the other thing. right? The Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago, says that there's even an evil inclination in the study hall, right?
Wow.
You go to synagogue to learn, and then, you get distracted. Someone tells you, oh, this mitzvah can only be done by you. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. And then you close your book and you go out. Right now, I'm not saying it's something that, could have been done by somebody else or not. That's a whole discussion, right? But there is an evil inclination, says the Vilna Gaon. There's even an evil inclination when a person learns, right? A person can get caught up in conversation, right? They get up in conversation about politics, about other things, but that's not really the point here, because we're not saying when he's learning and how he gets distracted. We're going to see there's the Mishnah later, right? We'll probably get that when I'm about 150 years old, right? We'll probably get there. It says that when a person's learning, you're not allowed to say, what a beautiful tree, right? What beautiful landscape. Or a person would say, what beautiful CG work, right? They're going to say, look, the Energizer Bunny, what a loser. You can't make anything better than that. Because if a person does that in the middle of learning, what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says you're liable for a death penalty. What do you mean? I'm praising God's creation. Yeah, but you should have been learning. God will tell you can praise his creation later. He's not interested you praising him while you're sitting and learning. Right? So whatever, we'll get there. We'll get there one day. But the point here is that a person should not say, right, when I'm free, I will study. Meaning when I'm free from work, when I'm free from doing other things,
right,
whatever it is, then I'm going to study. Or what some people may say is, I'm so busy working, I got this business, that business, all kinds of things, busy day and night. So when I retire, right, when I'm 65 or more or less, whatever it is, when I retire, I'll sit and learn, right? But the problem is when a person says that, that's really just an excuse. They may mean it, right? I'll cut some people some slack. Maybe they actually mean it over here. But the problem is that it's just an excuse, because a person is never going to be exempt from learning, right? They're going to say, well, I never have free time. I'm so busy. I think a person would be actually shocked out of their gourd if God actually played back the video, right? God plays back the video of your life and say, really? You were so busy? You were so busy working? You were so busy doing other things? You didn't have a chance to learn? You didn't have time to learn? And you were so busy playing on your phone? How many people playing Tetris? How many people playing Candy Crush? I don't know if people still play Candy Crush. Playing all kinds of games. Oh, gee, I'm busy. I'm busy playing over here. I don't have time to learn, right? So people are going to say, a bigger excuse would be when I have enough money. See, when I have enough money to retire, then I'm going to learn. So what about all Jews out there, right? Even Orthodox Jews that have plenty of money to retire. If they have plenty of money to retire, why don't they just put it aside, live off the interest, right, and sit and learn? So when I had money at one time, that's exactly what I did. Thank God I wasn't involved in business, wasn't involved in other things. So I did exactly what I should have done. I was sitting and learning, helping others, right? But how many people have enough money, right, who could have enough money to sit and learn, actually do that? Probably not very many. Probably not very many. Why? Maybe they want to make more money. Maybe they want to, put more aside, whatever the case. I know someone who is, a big businessman, owned a bunch of hotels, tremendous amount of money this person has. And he told me, he sat and learned for, 10 years, 15 years, while doing his business at the same time. And he said he can't get the business mentality out of his head. Now, the claim was that even if he wanted to retire, right now, now he's older, so it's a little bit easier. But in general, a person in their prime, even if they have plenty of money, they're probably going to open up another business, right? They're probably going to do other things. Why? Because it's part of their psyche, right? It's in their bones. It's so in their bones, a person will say, I can't do it anymore, right? That it's not possible. It's not possible to give up that mentality, to give up what you've done for so long, right? I'm not saying maybe they enjoyed it, right? A lot of people enjoy what they do, when they work, etc. So they enjoyed it, the give and the take and the hustle and this and that, right? A lot of people enjoy that, okay, right? But if a person has enough money, right? And someone told me many years ago, yeah, my financial guy said, if I don't have $3 million in the bank, I can't retire.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know how many people actually do that, right? Actually, say, okay, I have $3 million in the bank, I'm going to retire.
No,
They're going
I've
to say,
never met a satisfied millionaire.
I might lose it, right? We're going to see later that Mar b'nechasim, Mar b'daiga, when a person has a lot of property, the more they worry how they're going to keep the property, right? How they're going to keep their money. If a person has 100, they want 200. They have 200, they want 400. So a person, is subjected, to money, to that whole mentality. So being part of that whole mentality, thank God I was never part of that, but being part of that whole mentality, being a mover, a shaker, enjoying the thrill of the chase, right? When I was involved in real estate, people wanted to try and sell hotels, casinos,
right,
other things. It's like a daisy chain, right? This one had a connection to that one to another one, but it was the thrill of the chase. Right? It was the thrill of maybe I'm going to get a piece of the action. This is going to sell for $60 million. There are 20 people. I'll get, you get a third of a fifth of a whatever, right? So you make you could make $50,000, $20,000. It's the thrill of the chase. But when a person is part of that for so long, it's hard to get out of their system.
Yep.
So here, people make excuses. People are going to say, when I'm free, when I retire, when I have $3 million in the bank, right? That's why a Jew has an obligation to have fixed times for learning, right? Every single day, not just when I feel like it, I'll do it, or I'll do it later. I'll do it when I retire. I'll do it this time, that time, whatever. But there's a tremendous evil inclination, and that evil inclination does not want you to do that. Right? Certainly does not want you to do that. Now, there's a connection, what we said before, right? What we said before, don't separate yourself from the community, right? We talked about someone who leads a community, right? So over here, some say that the Mishnah is speaking about someone who leads a community, and he's so busy leading the community that, he's busy doing all kinds of things. What's the problem? Problem is he does not have time. He doesn't have any time. Right? It's like Scotty, give him, Captain Kirk says, I want you to get to warp 3, in about 45 seconds. And Scotty says, Captain, I need more time. I only have one engine, and Captain Kirk's like, Scotty, forget it. Just do it. I don't care. Just do it. Right? Need more time over here. Right? But what happens? Persons in charge of a community also has to have time to learn. It doesn't matter how busy they are. They have tremendous amount of responsibility. So what are they going to say when I'm free? Right? When I have free time, we're not busy with this, not busy with that, not busy with the other thing. That's when I'm going to be able to learn. See, that's how this whole thing is connected. Because what we're saying is, we said many things about someone in charge of the community, right? Things he has to look out for, right? Things that he's got to be careful what he says to others, how he runs things and all that. So if that's the case, that's what we're speaking about. When's he ever going to have free time? He's too busy, right? He's always busy over here. So one explanation is the fact that it's talking about someone who leads a community, right? Which connects it to the previous Mishnah, right? So who says he's going to have time, right? No one, he's so busy, he has so many responsibilities, then, he's not going to have time. But he'll say, okay, when these responsibilities sort of wane, then I'll have more time, right? But again, if a person, is in charge of a community, let's say, when's he going to have free time, right? When in the world is he going to have free time? You're not going to have that much free time. So therefore, it's problematic, right? He'll say, when I'm free, I'll be able to do it. Who says, right? Who says, and there are a million things that need to be done. And since the person's in charge of the community, he's got his hands, right? All with fingers and everything. And everything goes through him. So if everything goes through him, I would say it's almost impossible they're going to have free time, right? When is it going to be possible for them to shut off their phone? Never. When is it going to be possible for them, sit on their lazy boy, and sip a pina colada? They're not going to have time, right? They're certainly not going to have time, right? So it could be that's what it's speaking about. Another explanation comes along King Solomon. King Solomon tells us in Proverbs, right? He tells us in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 1. He says, you do not know what will happen today. Isn't that the truth? Right? Or you're going to say, well, maybe something will happen today, but maybe something won't happen tomorrow, right? Isn't that the story of Wimpy, and Popeye? I surely would pay you today if I could have another hamburger, right? Tomorrow, right? To say, you don't know what's going to be tomorrow. What, do you think Wimpy's going to hit, he's going to hit lotto? He's going to say, oh no, I'll pay you now. Of course they're going to make the money. What do like anyone who knows, has watched Popeye, knows about Wimpy, he's going to say the same thing tomorrow. And he's going to sit
gladly pay you Tuesday.
Right. He's going to sit there chomping on his hamburger, right? Nothing to talk about. So even the next day, right, as King Solomon here says, you don't know what's going to happen today. Well, what about tomorrow? You have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow you're going to be busy. Maybe tomorrow something else, possibly may go wrong. And when you wanted to learn, you won't be able to learn. Right? So, obviously there's not a shortage. There's not a shortage of things that can happen that can take us away from learning. If a person doesn't necessarily enjoy learning, let's say, and they're going to fix time anyway, right? They're going to have a fixed time anyway. Otherwise, kind of looks bad. Maybe it looks bad to their wife, looks bad to their kids, etc. So they're not necessarily doing it for the sake of heaven, right? Let's say, but any little thing, that if this person doesn't enjoy learning, what's going to be? Any little thing is going to take them away from learning. Oh, nope, sorry, I got to do this. Oh, sorry, I got to help this person with that. Oh, sorry, and a person's going to make excuses. But there are a million things that can take away a person from learning. So therefore, and the rabbis understood this, that they tell us you have to make a concerted effort in order to have fixed times to learn. In other words, those fixed times for learning, right, as we mentioned before with Rabbi Ephraim Margolius, the blessed memory, right, he would learn till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he told his wife, no matter what happens, I don't want to be disturbed. I'm learning till 2 o'clock. And one day some merchants come in. They want to see his husband. They said no. His wife said no. You can't disturb him. And they said, well, what do you mean? We have an opportunity for this person to make thousands and thousands of rubles without doing anything, right? Within a very short amount of time. 10 minutes, all it's going to take. And his wife said no. I can't disturb him, and that's it. They tried it this way, that way, the other way. They couldn't convince her. They left. So after he finished learning, his wife tells him the story. And you might think, well, maybe he missed such a business deal. Maybe it would have been worth it for him not to, to stop learning. But what did he say? He was dancing. He was dancing. Why? Because he said, unbelievable. God thinks my learning is worth, 10,000 rubles, right? It's worth $50,000. He was dancing, right? But that's the way it has to be. In other words, if a person's learning, unless, God forbid, the house is on fire or there's some major emergency, then you close the book, right? Otherwise, learning is sacred. Doesn't matter if it's for 10 minutes, doesn't matter if it's for 15 minutes, if it's a half an hour, whatever the time is that a person has to learn, that time is sacred. Nothing else matters, right? Zero matters. And that's what we have to change we have to show that, explain that to our spouses, to our kids. When someone's learning, you don't disturb, unless 100% it's an absolute, it's an absolute emergency. Otherwise you're taking away time, right? Then the evil inclination comes in. You don't want that, right? You certainly don't want that. So I would say, as we've spoken about a number of times, the learning that a person does should be every single day, should be at the same time. In other words, you don't want to learn, Sunday at, from 10 to 12 or whatever. Monday is going to be, 9 to 11. Tuesday is going to be 6 to 8. I mean, a person doesn't get any continuity. When a person's learning the same amount, meaning the same time, during the day on a regular basis, right? So that has a tremendous effect. If you're jumping from this to that to the other thing, right, different hours, different times, this and that, that's problematic. Why? It's problematic because you don't have consistency, right? One of the things we want to have in this world more than anything else is to be consistent. So I'll tell the following story.
Oh, I try so hard, Rabbi. So I try so hard to be consistent.
So I'll tell the following story that happened to me. And that was many years ago when I was becoming religious. So a family member said, oh, you do this, but you don't do that. Basically calling me out, saying you're not consistent. Right? Now, the person was true, right? It was true. And what would be the answer? What would be the answer if a person is really jumping all over the place? They're not really being consistent. What would the real answer be? And this I can tell you over many years. This is what our answer should be. You're 100% right. This is what I should be doing, but I'm not there yet. I'm not at that level. Now, what are they gonna say to that? Even if they're making fun of you, say, oh, you do this, you don't do that, you don't do the other thing, you're not consistent. What are they gonna say if you admit it? You say I'm right. You say you're right.
Not at that level.
But you admit it, but you tell them one day I'm going to get there. And that's my goal, right? My goal is to get there. So if the goal is to get there, even though you're inconsistent now, you have to make that your absolute goal. Because if you don't make it your absolute goal, you'll just continue being inconsistent, right? And it's a hard thing. Because when a person starts out, they become in a certain way fanatical, and they want to do everything, and they want to spread the word, and they want all this. That's all good, right? The problem is the evil inclination says, go ahead. I'm going to give you all the inspiration in the world. I'm going to give you it. You're going to be like fire, but you're going to be so sporadic. You're going to be so all over the place, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to sustain it. Eventually, it's going to fall flat in your face. Right? That is what's going to happen. So you have to take baby steps, but you have to have a goal. Right? And this is also
beautiful.
This is also crucial. If a person, even Orthodox Jews that grew up as Orthodox Jews, and they're learning, even if they know how to learn, they have to have goals in learning. If it's just, wow, I'm just learning this, or I'm just learning that, but they don't have any goals to how, even if they're working, doesn't really matter, right? They want to have certain goals. They want to feel accomplishment. It's not just, wow, I'm learning a little bit of this, or I'm learning a little bit of that, right? That, even if there is a little bit of consistency, am I covering ground? Am I getting somewhere? Am I accomplishing something? So I'll take it to an extreme, because I am an extremist, as many people may say, right? I'll take it to an extreme. I know somebody, I don't know if they still do it, but I know somebody many years ago, every Thursday for 15 minutes, Thursday for 15 minutes, they would learn Musar Sfarim. They would learn Musar books. They would learn the ways of the righteous. They would learn Path of the Just. They would learn Gates of Repentance, right? Classic books of ethics. So a person will ask the following question. And the question would be, okay, what can you accomplish in 15 minutes? Right? The legitimate question. What can I accomplish? What is it possible to do, and to go through in
little by little.
Minutes? So over the years, they actually finished whole books. They went through Path of the Just. They went through the ways of the righteous. So we may think, even if I learn a small amount of time, I'm not going to be able to accomplish anything. It's not true. The reason is, if a person learned a certain amount, right? Even if it's a small amount, right? But they have a certain goal. Obviously they have a time frame. They have a certain goal, what they want to accomplish. Okay, even in a limited amount of time, what are they going to do? They're going to do whatever it takes to accomplish that goal, right? So let's say a person, is learning something. They're going to learn it for an hour, right? Let's say, again, Musser's farm. Well, Musser's farm is a good example. Let's say less than that, half an hour. You learn it a half an hour a day, right? That's what most rabbis would recommend, right? A person to learn Musser, right? It's about a half an hour a day, but you got to think about it. You got to analyze it, not just to go through the pages. You got to think. You got to think a little bit about, what you're going through, how it affects your life, how much you want to change, right? All these different things. Now, in a half an hour, a person may say, I'm not going to accomplish that much, right? Now, that may be true. So even if you read 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs, and the next day you glance over what you learned, and then you go further, right? What's that going to do? You're going to get somewhere eventually, right? It's a slow process, right? But certain things you have to take very slowly, right? When you're learning ethics and you're feeling like a piece of dirt, right? You go through the book, The Gates of Repentance, right? And, let's say you're on the 3rd gate, which I'm giving class to myself give a plug for my subscription website that I do every week. And it talks about, we're speaking about 6 categories of people that do not see God's presence in the next world, right? One of them is people who habitually speak Lashon Hara, meaning it's not just they make a mistake, right? And they say, oh, I can't believe I spoke about so-and-so. It means they do it all the time, right? And they don't really care. Or people that are flatterers, right? Another example. Now, the Rabbeinu Yonah there says that there's another category of Lashon Hara which is less severe, right? It's still forbidden. It's a category called Avak Lashon Hara. What is Avak Lashon Hara? It means the dust, the dirt of Lashon Hara. Why is it called the dust? All right, what's an example? So before I even give the example, the Rabbeinu Yonah there says everybody transgresses it. It's not just something where, okay, a few people get carried away, this, that. He says it's common where everybody transgresses. Right? Now, what is that? So this is why, again, speaking Lashon Hara will not apply to non-Jews, right? But as a moral imperative, it's pretty important. Mm-hmm. And we'll give you the following example. Let's say someone's in a group of people. They're in a group of people, and somebody, Ruvain, we use Ruvain. Ruvain starts praising, Shimon. Now, Shimon's not there, but he starts singing the praises of Shimon. What a great guy he is, how learned he is, may even be a rabbi, all these different things. He's sitting there praising Shimon. All of a sudden comes along Levi, and Levi says, oh, you really think Shimon's such a nice guy, right? I know otherwise. And what does Levi do? He starts to speak against Shimon, right? And then, then someone else, then Yitzhak comes and starts speaking about Shimon. Then it's the whole party, right? You have a whole bunch of people speaking about Shimon. Now, they all transgress the prohibition of speaking Lashon Hara, but who caused it? Who caused it? Reuven. Reuven's the one who caused it. Why did he cause it? Because he was speaking about the praises of Shimon. Now, someone's going to ask the following question: why is that Reuven's fault? Right? What, does Reuven have to take a survey? How many people here don't like Shimon? Everyone raise your hand, all 3 of us, right? How many people don't like Shimon? Right? No, he's not going to ask that. Right? He's certainly not going to ask that. But if there's somebody, even if he's not aware, even if there's someone in the crowd who, he doesn't necessarily know the person, or even if he does, he's not aware that he has this hatred towards Shimon, this person starts speaking against Shimon, he should have known better. Why should he have known better? And that's why the Chofetz Chaim there says you're not allowed to speak, even praise someone in public, lest someone is going to disparage them. right? In other words, that's how far it goes. In other words, I have to be so ever careful, right? If you praise somebody, that people who you're talking to also think the same thing. Because if they don't think the same thing, and you are praising that person, and these other people start saying, it doesn't matter how many people, even one person, they start saying these negative things against Shimon, you get the transgression. You de facto get the transgression. They also transgress, no question. But you are the catalyst. You're the absolute catalyst. Right now, I'll make it a little more homegrown over here. Let's say we're gonna discuss who's the greatest basketball player of all time. Right? Let's say we're gonna get into such a discussion.
Michael Jordan.
Most people gonna say? MJ, of course. Gonna say Michael Jordan. Got 6 rings, right? He never lost in the playoffs, right? But there will be talk. What about LeBron? Right? What about the hick from French Lick? Larry Bird, right? Grew up in Boston.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
You got Kareem. You got other people. People say Kobe. What about him? What about Shaq? What about other people? Whatever. Yeah. Right? The whole list. There's a whole laundry list. Bill Russell, Chamberlain. I mean, the list goes on. It's a huge, Havlicek, whoever, right? There's a whole list. Whole list over here. Now, seemingly you're getting in an innocent discussion, right? But when you start mentioning things, all of a sudden tempers flare. Look at what MJ did over here. Defensive player of the year, scoring champion, all these different things, right? Never lost in the playoffs, all these different things. So sports gets heated, right? When you're talking about the greatest of all time, right? See, football, that won't be an issue, right? You got Mr. Brady over here, 7 out of 10, right? That's probably a non-issue. Oh, they'll say, what about Joe Montana? Joe Montana, 49ers. He went to 4 Super Bowls. Never lost. Yeah, but he only went to 4. Right? Brady went to 10 and 2. He should have won. It was unbelievable catches at the end of the game, that they lost. Okay. I'm not even going to go down that path. Right? But the point is it gets heated. It can get heated. Now, you didn't mean it for it to get heated. You had no intention people are going to go back and forth. And then all of a sudden people say, what do you know about basketball? You don't know anything about basketball. How are you, then it gets personal, right? Then it gets personal. And now you're doing it online, right? Part of social media. You can't repent for that. That's impossible because millions of people are seeing it. Damage has already been done, right? But something like that, it's very, very easy, right? Very, very easy. You listen to talk radio, whether it's sports talk radio, news talk radio, it's a Lashon Hara fest. That's all it is, right? Speaking about this one, speaking about that one, speaking about the other one. Now, in certain cases, it may be 100% permissible. That's not even the point, right? But the point is you got people calling in, and then you got the radio show hosts destroying them. Oh, come on. You really think that? Come on. My dead grandmother could have explained better than that. I mean, they insult them. I'm not saying all the time. I'm not saying part of the time, right? But, certainly if there's a difference of opinion, right? Today, people don't talk to each other. They talk at each other. People don't listen. They don't want to listen, right? So over here, the point is any of these discussions are probably going to lead to Lashon Hara, right? In other words, you're not going to see eye to eye, right? He's going to say MJ, I'm going to say Bird, right? Someone's going to say Magic. Someone's going to say, Kobe, someone else, right? Then you're going to bring it back. How are you going to prove it? Stats. How many championships did they win? How many MVPs did they win? What was their team like? We're not talking about making super teams today. They didn't have super teams then, because of free agency, but we're not even going there. Right? I don't want to show my expertise over here, right? We'll keep it to Torah. But the point is that the discussion is going to get absolutely heated. It's going to get absolutely heated. Who's the greatest of all time in this? An actor, a singer, a whatever. Bands. You got these bands that are going to be playing till they.
Yeah.
You gotta get these bands playing till they die. You got Mick Jagger's like almost 70 years old, still out there.
90.
You got Springsteen still out there. You got other people still out there. Okay. What else are they gonna do? Fine, right? But again, when you get in these discussions, when there are discussions about opinions, when they're about opinions, even if what you're saying you think is very true, right? You believe it to be absolutely true. Well, someone may disagree. You might say, well, this person is so righteous, and unbelievable. Look at all the books they read. I was like, really? Nah, this person's a fanatic. This person's this. You cause the other person to speak Lashon Hara, right? So that is something for non-Jews that does not make any logical sense, right? A non-Jew, remember, has to keep mitzvahs that make logical sense according to the Torah. Now, if you would ask anybody, secular Jew, secular non-Jew, and you tell them this halacha, they're going to say it's opinion. My opinion's better than theirs. I got better stats. I got better this.
Right.
Why is that problematic? Well, because the whole time says it's problematic. It's Lashon Hara. Who does not transgresses? That's the point. Who does not transgresses? We have to be careful, right? It's very, very difficult. Even if a person makes an innocent statement, right? A person, like a person could ask, the example Rabbi Chaim gives is someone asks, where can I find fire? Right? Say, oh, go to Shimon's house, right? He's always got his fire lit. He's always got his grill lit. He's always doing barbecues. So what are you saying? Well, Shimon likes to eat, right? So what happens? Or you say, someone says, oh, I just went to Shimon's house, for Shabbos. Oh, all that food, it's unbelievable. And then, people invite themselves, to Shimon's house. They take advantage of his hospitality, right? From a seemingly innocent statement, and then people come and they drain him financially. People that are empty-headed, that, want to come and take advantage over here. Now, you made an innocent statement. Your statement was, I had a great time at Shimon's house, right? I went there for Shabbos. Now, that's an innocent statement. You have nothing behind that, right? Then someone, all of a sudden someone takes it and says, oh, I heard Shimon's got great food. Let's go for Shabbos, right? And they drain him, right? That's forbidden. Now, did the person himself, did Reuven who said this, did he have any intention, for all these people to start going to Shimon's house and draining him? Certainly not. That wasn't his intention, right? But what was the question? Innocent question. Where can I find fire? Where can I find someone whose oven is still lit or whatever, right? Oh, go to Shimon's house. Now, there are different connotations, right? One connotation is Shimon likes to eat, right? If Shimon likes to eat, his fire is always lit because he's always making something. He's always making something on, in his stove, in his oven, etc. Or you could say, well, he likes to have gas. He likes to help others, right? You can look at it in different ways. Now, if someone looks at it the wrong way, a person's going to say, why is that my fault, right? Why in the world is that my fault, right? And the answer is it shouldn't be my fault, right? It definitely 100% should not be my fault, right? If it's not my fault, why am I held liable, right? And what's the answer? Because the Rabbi Chaim says you absolutely have to be careful what comes out of your mouth and what possible ramifications there are. Now, people said when the Rabbi Chaim came out with his book on the laws of Lashon Hara, said, Rebbe, it's a great book, but now you're saying I can't speak. Right? And the Rabbi Chaim said, I didn't say you can't speak. I'm teaching you how to speak. Right? I'm teaching you how to do it. I'm not telling you can't speak. Right? You just have to know how. So, all these laws, we certainly have to be careful of. But this is something that you're going to say doesn't affect me over here. Why do I have to be so careful? I have to be so careful because if someone misconstrues it and misuses it or whatever, I get the person who said it, not me, but the person who said it is going to get the transgression. Imagine a person gets upstairs after 120 years, all of a sudden he sees all these transgressions where people spoke Lashon Hara about others. And what's the person going to say? The person going to be flabbergasted. They're going to say, I didn't do that. Look, it's Reuven, Shimon, Levi, all these people. I didn't do that. I didn't say anything wrong. God says, didn't you learn? Didn't you watch on Pirkei Avos what you said? Didn't you watch? Go back. Let's go back in the Freddy Krueger movie. We'll go back and watch it. Go back in the dream. I'll take it back. Right? But you can't do that. Right? Point is, point is you're going to get all these transgressions because you caused other people to speak, against this person. But he said, I didn't do that. I didn't speak badly against the person. I was praising them, giving the respect that they deserve. Right? I'll give a major example, right? Because it can happen to me, and that is by certain people. If I mention my Rebbe's name, they just have negative things to say. They only have for a number of things. Now, he's one of the Torah giants of the generation. Whatever, doesn't really matter, right? But the point is, by certain people, I will never mention his name, ever. Why not? Because of this halacha. Because if I mention his name, they are going to trash him. They're going to say, oh, he should have done this. Oh, he should have done that. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Right? That would be me causing them to speak Lashon Hara. Right? So, so I run away from that like the plague. By certain people, I will never mention his name. And because I know for sure they're going to say something negative. Right? 100%. Right? If it's around people that certainly would never say anything negative, okay. But if you know somebody, this is I would say a more extreme case, but somebody that if you mention this person's name, they will say something negative. 100% of the time that's probably going to happen. Don't mention his name. Right? Or let's say you want to say something in his name. Let's say it's by your Shabbos table. Don't say in his name. Right? Just say it in general. Or just water it down or whatever. Because if you don't do that, and you say, Rabbi Sternbach said this, they're not going to hear. First of all, they're not going to hear it. Second of all, they're going to say, oh, him? Is he still alive? Has he gone senile yet? Right? Those are some of the comments that could be made. Right? So now, if I know this, which I do, if I know this, I can't mention his name. Right? That would be forbidden. That would be a Torah prohibition or a rabbinic prohibition of avak lashon hara. Right? Because somebody's going to speak badly against the person. But if I don't know that, all the more so if I don't know that, and someone ends up speaking badly against whoever, you also get the transgression, right?
Really?
Which is which boggles the mind. If you did it, if you knew somebody is going to speak badly, okay, that's certainly bad. But you're going to say, but if I don't know they're going to speak badly, and they end up doing it, that's not my fault. Comes along, the Chofetz Chaim says no. The Chofetz Chaim says you have to be so careful because you're now causing someone to speak Lashon Hara. But doesn't that person have free will? Of course he has free will. He can say good things, he can say bad things. Why is it my problem? Right? That's the question. Why is it my problem? You know why it's your problem? Because you should have been a heck of a lot more careful. Doesn't mean you have the right to say whatever you want. Right? Because it's an opinion question over here. Right? You're going to say, oh, this person's so great, this, that. Oh, really? How many rings does he have? How many rings? Right? If he doesn't have any rings, I don't want to hear about it. Right? Or whatever. Right? So that's an interesting idea. Comes along the Brisker Rav. Rav Yisrael Zev Soloveitchik, of blessed memory, one of the famous sons of Rav Chaim Brisker. Chaim Brisker lived more than 150 years ago, was in charge of the Volozhin yeshiva after Rav Chaim of Volozhin. And the Brisker Rav asked the following question, right? The basic question, I shouldn't say basic, but it's a question we really should have asked from the very beginning, right? What did the Mishnah say? Right? We'll teach you how to be a little bit analytical over here. What did the Mishnah say? Mishnah said, when I'm free, I will study. Maybe you're never going to become free.
Right.
Right? What's the obvious question? Right? All right. Alex, a blessed memory. Right? I'll take Brisker Rav. I'll take the Brisker Rav 400 points. Right? So what do we say over here? What did the Brisker Rav ask? What are you talking about? What do you mean if I'm free, I will study? That doesn't even exist. You got an obligation to study anyway. Right? If I have an obligation to study anyway, what do you mean when I'm free, I will study? That's not even a question. No. Right? Don't say when I'm free, I will study. What does that have to do with anything? I'm already obligated to study. Right? Men have an obligation to learn. Jewish men have an obligation to learn. What do you mean when I'm free? I already have an obligation. If I have an obligation, doesn't mean, oh, when I'm free, I'll study. Right? You're already obligated to learn. Right? So it comes along the Pirkei Rav, and the Pirkei Rav says, what's the case? What's the case over here? Because you cannot take this at face value, even though we did at the beginning. You can't take it at face value because it doesn't make any sense. Right? Absolutely doesn't make any sense. So says the Pirkei Rav over here, we're talking about where someone permits themselves to waste time. They say, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z now because I'll be able to better learn in the future. Right? In other words, I'll do something now, wasting time for whatever, but knowing in the future I'll be able to do it.
Right.
Right? So the Tana over here is teaching us what? Maybe you're not going to find that time. Right? Maybe you're not going to have the time later. And now you wasted time when you could have been learning. Right? In other words, let's say a person's going to say, okay, I'm going to do X right now. Whatever it is, it has nothing to do with learning. But I'm going to push off learning to do this. Okay. Right? What's the assumption? The assumption is, okay, I pushed off learning, for half an hour, 20 minutes, whatever it is. And then I'm going to go learn. Problem is, who says you're going to have time? Right? Who says you're going to find the time? So here, what do we have? We have a person is fighting, as we mentioned many times. Person is fighting against his evil inclination. His evil inclination doesn't leave you when you're sleeping, doesn't leave you when you're awake, right? Even if you overcome it in certain ways, it is going to come, it's still going to come in another way, in a third way, it'll come in 20 years, right? Even if something is dormant, it'll come later somehow, try and get a little bit of hole in the armor. The evil inclination, what does the evil inclination want? The evil inclination, when they see a person wants to do the right thing, right? They want to do God's will. Person wants to do the right thing. So what will the evil inclination do? So you might think, okay, the evil inclination is going to come and tell you not to do it, right? And the answer is no. It's not going to go to battle like that, because a person, if they're set on doing the mitzvah, they'll go out and do the mitzvah. So the evil inclination is not going to hit you necessarily dead on, right? Unless, let's say, oh, it's too cold, right? Or it's snowing, or it's icy. Why do you want to go out? Why do you want to do this, right? But a person's bent on doing the mitzvah. Okay. So what does the evil inclination do? The evil inclination does not fight them directly, kind of sneaky, right? Snarly, as we would call it. Right? What would it rather do? It's going to work hard in order for you to push off the mitzvah. That's what it's going to do. In other words, It's going to cool you off from actually doing the mitzvah. So in other words, you're all excited. Your blood's boiling. Oh, I'm going to do this mitzvah.
Wind in your sails.
I'm going to do whatever it is. You're all gung-ho. You're all excited. What happens? You get delayed. Right? I don't know. Something happens and you push it off. Right?
Deflated.
Maybe you push it off even for a small amount of time. So even if you push it off for a small amount of time, whatever that amount of time is, you've just been cooled off. Since you've been cooled off over here, person is less likely to do the mitzvah. Doesn't mean they won't do the mitzvah, but the fact that they're all excited and now they're a little bit cooled off over here, then it pushes off doing the mitzvah. So therefore comes along the Tana over here, and he tells us that a person's thoughts for wanting to do the mitzvah really should be joined with the mitzvah of learning Torah, to actualize it, perform it, because maybe they won't find any other time to do it. So there are a few things going on over here. First of all, let's say a person has a desire to do a mitzvah, right? So the Torah, even if they don't do it, the fact that they have the desire to do it, the Torah gives them credit as if they did it. So you have two things. I have the thought of doing it, and I actualize it also with learning. right? It doesn't necessarily mean I did the mitzvah. On the other hand, if a person started the mitzvah, and this is a little more scary, and that is that let's say a person started the mitzvah. If they start the mitzvah and they don't finish it, the punishment is you bury your wife and kids in your lifetime. Now, let that sink in a little bit. What's the difference? If I had the thought to do the mitzvah and I didn't do it, but you didn't do it, right? You didn't do the mitzvah. Why should I get credit? On the other hand, if I started the mitzvah, but I didn't finish it, then the punishment is, God forbid, you bury your wife and kids in your lifetime. Now, why is that punishment so severe, right? We'll take the other side first. Why is that punishment so severe? Because what are you saying? You are saying that I'm doing the mitzvah, I'm in the middle of doing the mitzvah, and you get sidetracked, right? Somehow you get sidetracked, or maybe someone's going to finish it, whatever it is, you get sidetracked, you don't finish the mitzvah. What are you saying? You're basically saying, God, it's not really so important for me right now. It was important. I'm not going to say it wasn't important. But what you're saying now is it's less of a priority. Or it's a non-priority. Right? Now, you're doing this for the sake of God. That's the only reason we do mitzvahs. Because we believe we're commanded to do it. Now, if you believe you're commanded to do it, what's your excuse if you're in the middle of it not to finish? Now, you may be under onus, right? A person, something may happen where you have no choice. You have to leave what you're doing. It could be an absolute emergency. That's something different, right? Because there's another Talmudic dictum, and that is onus rachmana patre. Person's under onus, the Torah exempts them. They're exempt. Why? Because they're under onus. It has to be a real onus. Like your house is on fire. You got to rush to the hospital for something. Whatever. Right? It has to be something that is legitimate. If it's not something legitimate, you got sidetracked. You got sidetracked in the middle. Whatever it was. Someone called you. You went out to see them. Whatever. You forgot what you were doing. In the middle of what you were doing. So what happens? Basically, you're saying this is more important than actually finishing the mitzvah. Right? So if a person does that, what do we see? We see that, first of all, there's something lacking in them. I don't think there's any question about it, even though we're on a very, living in a very low generation today. I don't think there's any question. The point here is the fact that if a person has that opportunity, and they waste the opportunity. They're in the middle and they just go off and do something else. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be something flippant. It doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it on purpose. But the end result is they stop what they're doing. Since they stop what they're doing, right, the punishment is so severe. Just like the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, as it says later, two people learning, and someone says in the middle of learning, wow, what a beautiful tree. What a beautiful sunset. What a beautiful view of the Grand Canyon, or the prairies. What a beautiful view over here, of Lake, whatever, Winnebago, who knows, right? Whatever it is. He's going to say, wow, you're praising God's creation. Isn't that a good thing? What does the Torah there say? The Torah says you're liable for a death penalty. Why am I liable for a death penalty? I'm praising God's creation. Right? So isn't God going to say, what a tremendous thing that is? You're praising my creation. Let's say, Saturn, Jupiter came down. We could actually see it with a telescope. You're in the middle of learning. Say, wait, I can see it right now. I'm going to miss it if I don't see it right now. You won't see it on YouTube. It won't be on YouTube. No one's recording it, right? You might miss it. Okay, but you're in the middle of learning. If you're in the middle of learning, what are you saying? What you're saying is this is more important than learning God's Torah. But isn't it true? Right? I'll go on a limb here. Isn't it true? Praising God's creation? Isn't that at least somewhat equal to Torah? To learning Torah? Right? In other words, isn't that what we pray, in the morning? We praise God's creation. It's part of prayer. Right? It's part of King David's Psalms. Right, we say many things, praying God's, praising God's creation. Okay, there's a time for prayer. There's a time for learning, right? Each thing has its place. But if a person's learning, forget about wasting time speaking about politics or who's the greatest athlete of all time or whatever, right? And all that, which I can't imagine anyone would do anyway, right? But in general, if time's being wasted, that's a different issue, right? But if you're doing something that's praising God at the same time, and you're praising His creation, then why is the punishment so severe, right? And what's the simple answer? The simple answer is when a person's sitting and learning, you should not be thinking about God's creation, right? You should not be thinking, oh, the star, the moon, this, that, right? What am I concentrating on? I'm concentrating on the text at hand, right? I'm learning ethics, right? I'm learning, a person's learning Shari Tshuva, gate to repentance, right? So, oh, wow, you're talking about getting punished for someone who's a habitual speaker of Lashon Hara, back and forth. What does it mean? Does it mean like this? It means like that. What's he getting at? What else? Oh, wow. Saturn. Those unbelievable rings. Jupiter. Wow. Unbelievable. What am I doing over here? Not only you lose concentration on where you were before, right? But you're putting things in that don't belong. Again, in general, we would say there should be nothing wrong with it. There should be absolutely nothing wrong with it. But the answer is everything has a time and a place.
Right.
Right. And if it's out of whack when you really should be doing something else, right, then the punishment is more severe. Yeah. Question.
Well, there's a couple up on YouTube. Roseanne asks, first of all, there's two questions I want to ask you from online. Roseanne asks, are Noahites also commanded to study daily?
The answer is no. They're obligated to know what applies to them. Right? In other words, there are laws that applies to Jews. There are laws that apply to non-Jews. So the laws that apply to non-Jews, I would say, are much more severe because the laws, the punishment for not upholding the Noahide laws is death. Now the reason is because these things are obvious. Right? Don't steal, don't kill, these type of things, even though there's an umbrella. There are like 70 laws, 65, 70 laws, whatever, when it comes to Noahide laws, but there are subcategories. What about euthanasia? Does euthanasia apply? Right. Will euthanasia apply to a non-Jew? They pull the plug. Is that considered murder? Or if somebody, if they're arguing with someone tries to kill them and they end up killing the other person when they really could have just injured them, right? Something like that. Well, self-defense doesn't, I just got this question recently. I'm going to deal with it in my Q&A next week. Self-defense means that I stop the person from hurting me. Doesn't mean I have to kill them.
Right.
Right. In other words, if I could have stopped them without killing them, then I should have. There's no mitzvah to kill someone if they're up against you. No mitzvah at all. Even if you think it's a mitzvah to kill them, there isn't. Right? So, someone asked me like a whole bunch of subset questions, which really came back to the same thing, which is if a person's coming after me, I have to do everything to stop them. If I have to kill them, you kill them. Right? But if there's a way to stop them without killing them, there's no mitzvah to kill them. None. No mitzvah to kill them. So these laws, obviously, Noahide has to learn, right? Otherwise, they may be liable, certainly, for the death penalty. That these things are obvious, right? They're obvious according to the laws of the Torah. At the same time, would I say a Noahide has an obligation, according to the Torah, to learn every day? I think it might be a moral imperative, right? I think it's certainly a good thing. I don't think there's any question about that. Right. Obviously, if we're consistent learning every day, that's certainly a good thing. But do they have an obligation, like a Jew does, learning every day? No.
Can I ask one more from somebody online, Rabbi?
Say again?
Can I ask one more from somebody on YouTube?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that answers the question. Basically,
yeah.
That I think it's a good thing to do. Obligation according to the Torah, you don't have. You shouldn't have.
All right. Ben Noack in New Jersey, he asks a question. Now, I think this has to do because you had mentioned about someone burying their wife and children.
Right.
He says, is the family being punished because of a husband's mistake? And does that relate to Noahides? I mean, we're trying out here to understand, hopefully, that we can curb and correct our paths. I know that we're not commanded to do exactly what the Jewish people are, but if we understand the notion behind it, we're definitely not going to do it. Nobody wants to make these mistakes in error by not knowing, and this is what I truly love about understanding ethics.
It's also a difference if a person did something premeditated and they did it by mistake. Now, even doing something by mistake, I've gotten this question a number of times where someone says, what about people in India? As I say, what about them? People in India that worship cows, that are Hindus, that are, whatever they follow. They're not educated. But Hinduism, Buddhism, all these things, it's idolatry. It's 100% idolatry.
Well, I think the context was for not completing a mitzvah. When you started it, you said if you start the mitzvah and you don't do it, I mean, does that? I mean, the Sheva mitzvah for a Noahide, we start to do them. I mean,
apply to a non-Jew, right? That only applies to a Jew, right? The question by a Noahide though is, are there ramifications if they don't do what they're supposed to do, right? And there certainly are. But again, the question. We'll just backtrack a second and we'll get to it, right? The question is, ignorance isn't bliss over here.
No.
Right? In other words, I get contacted by people from India a lot, that want, either want to be Noahides, want to convert or whatever. So not everyone is eating the same hallucinogenic mushroom over here, right? They can get on the internet. They can find out information, right? People can find out information. But if someone grew up that way and they were brainwashed, okay, I was also brainwashed as a kid, right? We're all brainwashed. Society brainwashes us. So we all, everybody needs a little bit of good, brainwashing for the right way, in the right way.
Right.
Certainly not in the wrong way. But so, someone will ask, but these people live in backwater places. They don't know anything. They don't know any better. Okay, God gave everyone a brain, right? Famous Medrash says that someone died as a fisherman, got upstairs and God asked him, did you learn Torah? Right? The whole question, were you honest in business? Does that question come up first? Did you learn Torah? Does that question come up first? The whole question, which question comes up first, doesn't really matter. Point is, the fisherman said, how could I have learned Torah? You didn't give me brains to learn Torah. God says, really? So what was your profession? My profession was a fisherman. Okay, very good. So how'd you make a living from being a fisherman? Oh, I took nets. I attached these strings. I made these big nets. I went out. I did this. I did that. Goes this whole intricate detail, right, of what he did as being a fisherman, right? So God comes along and says, I guarantee you. He says, I guarantee you, the same God that gave you the brains to be a fisherman, to make a livelihood like that, be a used car salesman, right? Could have also given you the same brains to learn Torah. Right? So it doesn't matter where a person grew up, unless they're mentally challenged. That's a different issue. Right? But if somebody
brain damaged.
If someone, right, not mentioning anybody, any people in general, right? But somebody who does not have, brain damage and they're relatively normal. So God gave everyone a brain, right? People come out of Christianity. How do they come out of Christianity? They think it doesn't make sense. A lot of questions that they don't get answered. So just because someone's in a backward place doesn't mean he's exempt, right? It might mean he might think harder and get out of it. Okay. But, they're going to be liable. They're certainly going to be liable. Ignorance isn't, is not going to be bliss over here.
No.
But at the same time, I'm not a prophet or son of a prophet or grandson of a prophet. We don't know how these things work, right? When we see somebody die, or they suffer, or families suffer, sickness, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know why it happens. We certainly know children that get sick have nothing to do with them. It has to do with their soul in a previous life, because they're not punishable, right? Let's remember, children are not punishable till the age, Usually the age of 13 when they become bar mitzvah, or up to the age of 20. Right? Usually by the age of 20, they're going to be liable. Right? Really should be by 13, but whatever, the whole discussion that it can even be up to the age of 20. Right?
Wow.
But that being the case, we don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody knows why people are born rich, why poor, why some people lose their money, why some people have sickness, right? But if a child is born, brain damage, leukemia, other things, it has nothing to do with them per se, right? It has
potential still exists.
It has to, right, but it has to do with their soul coming to this world to be fixed up because it made mistakes before, and now it has to go through this whole thing, right? Because the reality is it cannot be for punishment. Why not? Because they're not liable for punishment. Even if a child, let's say they're playing ball, right, and someone hits the ball, breaks someone's window. I say, oh, I'm exempt. I don't have to pay. Well, they should pay, right? At least the parents should pay. Why? Because then if they do that, no one's ever going to pay anything. But really, technically, they're not liable, right? They're certainly not liable. There's a famous story with the Stipler Gaon, the father of Chaim Kanievsky, of Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, of blessed memory. And he was one of the Torah giants of the last generation. And he went to a bar mitzvah. Which was very rare for him in his old age, and couldn't really walk so well. Anyway, he goes to the bar mitzvah. He goes to this bar mitzvah, and he goes up to the bar mitzvah boy and asks him for forgiveness for something he might have said or done or whatever. And why did he do it by his bar mitzvah? Because beforehand, it wasn't liable, right? There's no liability because the child is underage. The child cannot say, I grant you forgiveness. Why? I mean, in theory, we train our kids to do that, right? But it can't really take effect until they're over the age of bar mitzvah when they have obligations, right? If they're under the age of bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, 12 or 13, right? In other words, they're not liable, but you have an obligation to train them. You have an obligation that they have to keep Shabbos, that you cannot feed them things that are not kosher. I mean, there are laws governing how we educate our kids, right? Which is a whole nother discussion, right? But again, if a person, God forbid, their wife and kids die in their lifetime, are we able to, is anyone able to say in this generation, no matter how great they are in Torah, oh, it's because of this, that, and the other thing? If there are certain things that are obvious, maybe, right? Maybe that's the case, right? But let's say, give an example. There are 4 corporal punishments according to Judaism. One of them is skila, the most severe, right? If you desecrate Shabbos, skila means that there's a temple in Jerusalem. Someone says, you have 2 witnesses, person smoking a cigarette, and say, listen, if you smoke that cigarette on Shabbos, we're going to kill you. And they say, afal Pirkei, and they say, I don't care, right? So the person lights up the match, starts smoking, right? You could kill them, right? You throw them off 3-story building. If that doesn't kill them, well, you take a big rock, aim for their heart. You know what they say? If the left one doesn't get you, the right one will. Right? That's the first. Second is sreifa. Right? Let's say someone commits adultery. Right? So what would you do? You would hold the person's mouth open and you would put molten lead down their throat. Right? That is you'll die. Another one is hereg, head chopped off. And the fourth one is chenek, where you get choked to death. None of these are good, right? And certainly the Talmud says that the rabbis went beyond the letter of the law, making sure people did not get the death penalty for a number of reasons. Regardless, the Torah wants to show how severe it is. Now, the Talmud says that even though these 4 corporal punishments don't exist, right? We don't have a temple in Jerusalem. Even if you're going to tell me, most people never got it, never really happened, okay, right? But even so, so why does the Torah tell me this? The Torah tells me this to show the severity, right? So one example, right, let's say of skila, of being thrown off a 3-story building, that could be for desecrating Shabbos. That could be for homosexuality. That's also a pretty severe sin. Now, today we don't have the punishment, right? We don't have that corporal punishment, but it is brought down. Just because we don't have that punishment doesn't mean it doesn't exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? What is skila, right? What do we say skill is someone desecrated Shabbos? You throw them from a 3-story building, right? What does that mean? Impact. Right? In other words, the person gets thrown. I mean, I wouldn't try this, but, in theory, you throw someone off a 3-story building, right? From their loins, right? From their hips, you throw them, they go splat, right? Now, what happens in my language? You go splat. That's it. It's over, right? You break every bone in your body, you'll die. Now, if that doesn't kill you, so you take this huge boulder, aim for the heart. That will kill you, right? That's something that will kill you. Good. Now, if that doesn't exist, that punishment today doesn't exist, right? We don't have a temple in Jerusalem, regardless whether it happened or not. But what do we have today? We have today people could die in impact. How could they die in impact? Car accident, right? Person dies in a car accident. Or there's a story here, family, horrific thing, got in a car accident, car caught on fire, they'll burn to death, right? They have two things. You have impact and you have fire. Fire can be sreifa, can be the second of corporal punishment. Now, with that being said, I don't want, anyone to splice this and take it out of context, as I'm sure people could. And that is that even if that happened, a person died in a fire, person died in a car crash, even if they were a homosexual, even if they desecrated Shabbos, we cannot say, oh, see, God took care of them with corporal punishment. Now, it may be true. We cannot, right? And I'm not saying it's not true. It could very well be true, right? But we don't have the shoulders. Nobody has the shoulders to say this is why it happened. Now, if someone is born autistic or has leukemia or whatever, we can say that's not a punishment for the child, that's a punishment for the soul. That we have sources for, right? That's a lot of Kabbalah 101, which we're, speak about reincarnation and how reincarnation works. That might be next week's, not this week, but probably next week's Tanakh talk. We'll speak about that and how it works, right? But something like that, okay, we have sources for, right? That we have sources for, and it's not out of the realm of possibility, to say that. It's not saying, it's not like someone saying, oh, you had a kid that had leukemia, died of cancer. Oh, it's got to be because of this, that, and the other thing, right? We know it cannot be punishment for them right now. It can't be. So it has to be, it's punishment of the soul, right? If it's punishment, what the soul had to go through, etc., that's what I call a quarter consolation. Because if we say God does things, we don't understand it, how is God all good if we suffer? That's a legitimate question, right? It's definitely a legitimate question, right? But the problem is, if you tell somebody that had an autistic child, or you tell somebody that had, let's say had a stillborn, had a miscarriage, right? We know somebody that the daughter had a miscarriage and the soul came to them and said, it has nothing to do with you. You just had to be the one to carry it, but I'm now, my soul had to go through this for whatever reason, etc. You have nothing to worry about. Everything's good, right? So I would say that's like a quarter or half a consolation because, that woman obviously wanted to have the child, right? And that child, it didn't happen. So part of it could be the child didn't have to be born. The child just had to go through that process, and then get aborted, or whatever the case is, for that. So, again, that's like, I would say, a quarter or half of a consolation. But we have no idea. We have no idea what we see, right? No. Again, could we think in the back of our mind, maybe they're getting punished this way, that way? We always want to look at the positive of what people do. But what if someone's evil, right? They blaspheme against God. They don't care. They may know nothing, right? It doesn't really matter. The punishment could be very severe. And we'll say, okay, the person deserved it. Person deserved to suffer. Person deserved this. But we don't know what's going on, right? The famous example I always give is a person's on a respirator. Person's on a respirator, because I heard this firsthand from the doctor himself, that the siblings, etc., come and they want to pull the plug on the patient. So the doctor agrees. They pull the plug on the patient dies, and that soul of the patient comes to the doctor. Right? Now imagine someone has this dream. This doctor has this dream twice. And the dream is the soul says, you murdered me, you killed me. I was only waiting there, a few more days. I could, that was my punishment. That was my olam haba. That was my place in the next world. And now I'm suffering, and I'm in hell, and I'm going through all this suffering, and it's your fault, and you're a murderer. This guy wakes up, right? Imagine that type of dream. And he had it twice, right? This doctor had the same dream twice, right? A little more graphic, I think, the second time. And if I remember correctly. And this person was scared the absolute wits out of them, and they eventually became an Orthodox Jew. This doctor, he's telling the story. So what do we think? We think the person's sitting there, lying there, right? Lying there in a coma, and even if they come out of it, the person will be brain damaged, as the doctors will say, and all this. Maybe true, right? I'm not going to argue that. Let's say it's true. But person's in the coma, and you don't see what's going on in the background. You don't understand the suffering the person's getting now is giving the person the next world. It's giving the person his olam haba. So you think, person's a vegetable. We have the right to give life, to take life. It's all in our hands. We can do this, we can do that. And essentially it's murder, right? That's what it is. Or as a relative said by their father, after the father died, the father had a pacemaker. The father was dying anyway. Said, we couldn't make him suffer anymore, so we cut the pacemaker. Right? We cut the pacemaker. So I asked somebody, I said, would this person have died anyway? They said yes. But the fact they cut the pacemaker, died 2 hours instead of 6 hours. You're not allowed to shorten the life. You're not allowed to shorten the life. You don't know what's going on, what the suffering is, with the person suffering. And I'll just throw this out there, because anyone who suffers, even, if they're on the way out, they understand, they're going to die. They have to admit that the suffering is atonement. Right? In other words, if they just suffer and they say, I'm suffering or whatever, and this is so bad, I want to die, the suffering does not atone for sin. Person has to acknowledge where the suffering comes from. If they acknowledge the suffering is coming from God, and they acknowledge that it's because of their sins, the suffering can be penitential over here. The suffering can wipe away a myriad number of transgressions. Many deep transgressions. Yeah. The only thing is, a person has to admit it. A person has to say the purpose of it all is that I'm getting suffering to atone. Right? If they don't say that, and they just go through the motions that I'm suffering and I want to die. So some people think suffering's atonement just because it is. Right? In other words, suffering, we say every day in our prayers, God, don't bring me to suffering. But suffering wipes away sin. We're not masochists. We're not Christians over here. We're not masochists that say, someone's going to come suffer for us. Well, that's great. You don't have to suffer. Someone else did it. That's called passing the buck. Right? That's called a third and long, or a punt, as we would call it. Right? Maybe not in the CFL.
A Hail Mary.
That's what we call it, right? So in the end, if a person suffers, they have to acknowledge where it comes from. If you don't acknowledge where it comes from, and a person says, I'm just suffering, woe to me, suffer, 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 but you don't realize that, God's going to make you suffer, but he takes away, he's going to take away many, many sins. Nobody wants to suffer. Right? Now, when we get upstairs, we understand what suffering can do and how suffering can take away many, many sins. Myriad number of sins. We'd all be masochists over there and say, God, give me more. Give me more. Take this away. Take that. I don't care. Give me all the suffering so I can be squeaky clean in the next world. Nobody's going to do that. Right? Most people are not going to do that because they don't want to suffer. Now, there is a story with Rav Mordechai Pogramansky of blessed memory, one of the Torah giants of the last generation. He was unbelievable rabbinic scholar, died very young of cancer, and he died after the war, shortly after World War II. And he was blind, suffering tremendously, and they wanted to give him morphine, to ease the pain. So when he heard that, he sat up with all his strength, pointed his finger, up to heaven, and he said, God, do whatever you want in my body. He said, I want you to give me all the pain that you can give me for whatever sins I've done, because I'm going to come squeaky clean to you in the next world. Now you're going to tell me, how is that possible? A human being can do that? Okay. You're talking about someone who's, was one of the Torah giants of the last generation. But that should be our attitude. Okay, if a person's suffering, we're looking at suffering as a beneficial thing, right? In the sense that it takes away a lot of sin. At the same time, how many people are ready to sign up for it? Probably not too many, right? I can't imagine too many people are going to sign up. Nobody wants it. So the point here is that when it comes to what we see in this world, we don't have a clue. We don't understand anything that we see. And quite frankly, it would be an absolute chutzpah in many ways to say, yeah, this person's getting it for this person's getting it from that. There's a lot of information we don't see.
Right.
There's a lot of things we don't understand. And, God takes care of the world. And even if we see someone that seems to have it easy in this world, God will take care of them. Right? Take care of them in this world, take care of them in the next world. And even if, God forbid, they die in their sleep, which probably most of these people are not going to have, they'll probably die a pretty horrific death, whatever it is. But God will take care of them, even if they die in their sleep. That doesn't really matter, right? Because we certainly believe God's going to take care of them in the next world, for sure. Right? So it's not our judgment, it's not our call. But what do people get caught up in? People get caught up in the fact that how do you have a right to say? You don't know. But there are certain things we do know. Right? There are certain things we do know. Right? Again, when it comes to Kabbalah and it comes to what the soul goes through and the potential or wasted potential, and they may have to come back in this world and suffer, go through certain things, that we do know. Right? At least, it's brought down in Kabbalistic sources. So if that
your camera got knocked, Rabbi.
My camera got knocked. Oh, yes,
yep,
it did.
we're now seeing you nose. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a little better. Yep, perfect.
Okay, so, if that is the case, there are certain things we do know. And if there are certain things we do know, we can make that claim. But there are plenty of things we don't know. Right? There are many, many things we don't know. And it would be absolute chutzpah for someone to say, well, it's this, that, and the other thing. It's conjecture.
Well, like you said earlier, even sometimes we shouldn't be saying certain things.
No, 100%. A person has to be, has to be careful. I'll give an example, right? The Holocaust is always a touchy subject, right? Always a very touchy subject. And even if there was a tremendous amount of assimilation going on in Germany and in other places, right? Now, someone could say with everything going on, that could probably be the reason why the Holocaust happened. Now, the reality is it could be, right? We're not going to say not. Maybe it is, but we don't know. We're still too close. We don't,
right.
We don't know. But again, someone whose whole family, was killed in the Holocaust, even if they brought up as religious Jews or whatever, you're going to say, well, that's the reason. That's why your parents had to die. That's why your grandparents had to die. That is not going to be beneficial to them. Is it possible? It's possible. It's possible that's the reason. Is that the only reason? Could be a million reasons why. Could be very well be a million reasons why. So anyone who's going to speak about such a touchy subject, right? It's all about ifs. We can't say for sure. We don't know, right? No, is it collective punishment? Yes. That we can say, because Jews from all stripes got killed. Hitler, Yamach Shemoy V'Zichroi, may his name be blotted out, may he rot wherever he is, right? He didn't distinguish whether your father was a Jew or your mother was a Jew, right? He didn't come into question who's a Jew. He didn't care. If you had any Jewish blood, that means you deserve to die. Even if they fought the wars, they went to the university, they intermarried, it doesn't matter, right? He himself did not care. So therefore, if some Jews are doing the wrong thing, that means that we are one collective unit. If we are one collective unit, right, as we say, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh, all Jews are intertwined. If all Jews are intertwined, someone does something in France, the Jews suffer somewhere else. If if a Canadian in the prairies does something wrong, we're not going to say, okay, we're going to kill all Canadians. Never happened, right? Or if an Italian in Brooklyn does something, oh, let's burn down Italy, right? Let's burn down China. You got Chinese people doing the wrong thing, whatever. You don't have that. I'm not saying there's not discrimination. Plenty of discrimination that exists, which is wrong, right? But nobody makes collective punishment or collective things more than Jews. You can say it about the blacks. Right now, there's a lot of Asian anti-Semitism in the States. You could say that to a certain extent, but I don't think collectively, if you look at history, and you certainly look at Jewish history, I don't think there's any question, what the Jews have gone through more than anybody else in the history of man. They've suffered more than anybody else, right? I mean, the blacks will make their claim, but they don't really have a claim over here. They don't have a claim, close to what the Jewish people went through. Yeah, there was slavery. There were other things that
not to downplay.
That's all true, right? But I don't think, if history serves me right, if my mind's still working, that there was a collective genocide against them. I mean, there might be discrimination. Not going to say not.
Right.
And slavery is wrong and all that. That's all true, right? That's all true. Collective destruction against them.
Right.
I know you can tell me there are institutions against them, other things, but there's never been, you never saw such a thing that's happened to the Jews throughout their history, not just World War II, right? There have been pogroms against the Jews. Watch my video on Tanakh Talk. I went through Jewish history, and what happened to the Jews, by the Romans, by the Greeks, by the Babylonians. Absolute destruction. You have more modern times. What happened? You have the Inquisition. You have a Chimanilki in the 1600s, 1640, 1650. All the destruction. Anti-Semitism in Europe. There are plenty of blood of Jews in Europe, in Russia, and other places. I mean, it's unbelievable the Jews have actually survived. You don't have that with the blacks. You don't have that with any other group. You don't have that with Puerto Ricans, with the Chinese, Korean. You don't have it with any of them. I'm not saying there's not discrimination. Plenty of discrimination out there, unfortunately, right? But nothing collective like it's been against the Jews, right? I don't think there's any. That's indisputable. I mean, people can dispute it. I think they're off their rockers, but I guess you can dispute anything. But something like this collectively against the Jewish people, and how many people have been murdered, gassed, butchered, exiled, all these different things throughout the millennium just because they're Jewish. I mean, look at Christian anti-Semitism. Oh, you killed our Savior. Okay, that may be true, right? That certainly may be true. And how many Jews have been killed in his name, right? In JC's name, thousands, millions. It's pretty unbelievable. So that means there's collective punishment. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what some Jews are doing or what other Jews are not. You want to say all these religious Jews are doing the right thing, but yeah, you got 13 million Jews not doing anything. They don't know anything. So what are we doing to educate them? What are we doing to do other things? So we're our own worst enemy because they're not going to be judged as harshly as we are. Why not? Because they grew up as potato farmers in the prairies. No offense to anyone who grew up in the prairies or was a potato farmer. It means they don't know anything. If they don't know anything about anything, does not mean they're not liable, right? They will certainly be liable, no question about it. And they may disappear. At the end of days, they're just disappearing. No tomorrow. There's no question about that. But where's the onus? Where is the responsibility? You say, well, isn't the responsibility on them? That's true. There is tremendous responsibility on them, but they're disappearing. So really, who's the responsibility on? It's ours. Right? And there's a lot of infighting, a lot of Lashon Hara against different groups and different things. We're our own worst enemy. So really, it doesn't start with someone who's a potato farmer, right? It starts with someone who knows better, right? It starts with somebody who should not misrepresent when it comes to business, right? Someone, an Orthodox Jew shouldn't lie, who shouldn't do other things that go against what the Torah says. So you're going to tell me, well, if they do, how can they be Orthodox Jews? Well, it's a good question. That's a good question. The point is that when you had people dying secular Jews died in the Holocaust. What was their claim? Their claim is, we fought in your wars. We went to your schools, your universities. We ate your food. We married your women. All these things. We're like you. We're so much more like you. Why are you killing us? Kill them. They're different, right? Jewish anti-Semites, they're different. They don't keep your laws. They eat differently. Isn't that what Haman, Mr. Haman himself said in the book of Esther? There's a nation spread out. They don't eat your food. If a fly, if you touch their wine, they won't drink it, etc. So Achashverosh says, yeah, good idea. Let's destroy them. Let's kill them. Achashverosh is not a saint over here. Certainly not a saint over here. He's no different than Haman. The fact that he ends up killing Haman in the end is pretty miraculous, for a lot of different reasons. But the point of all this is that you can run, but you can't hide.
Nope.
You can say, a Jew can say, I'm going to dress like you dress. I'm going to marry your women. I'm going to go to university. I'm going to be, quote unquote, someone productive in society. I'm going to do all these good things, and you're going to love us, right? And you're going to make us part of you. And what's the answer? The more a Jew does that, the more they're going to hate you, right? The more what we say, if a Jew does not make Kiddush, they don't sanctify the day, Friday night or on a festival by making Kiddush, by drinking wine or grape juice, the non-Jews make Havdalah. Right? Havdalah means to distinguish. Right? Havdalah is really the short service after Shabbos or a festival, and a festival is over. Right? But Havdalah here means to distinguish. Right? So if you don't do what you're supposed to do, the non-Jews will tell you. The non-Jews will make you aware. Anti-Semitism will be on the rise. Why? Because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Even though I heard someone say many years ago, the Jews would be more united if there was more anti-Semitism. We don't need more anti-Semitism. There's plenty out there, right? We're not lacking. We're not lacking for anti-Semitism. But the point is, if we try and be more like them, they themselves are what? They're going to remind us we're still Jewish. And I certainly felt, I went to a high school, 1,000 kids in the high school, there were like half a dozen Jews, if that, in the high school. I definitely felt it. I definitely felt I was different. I wasn't a religious Jew then, right? But there were, underlying statements that kids said, that, obviously were anti-Semitic. Now, was that something I was going to report, to the principal? Say, oh, look what this person said. Okay, if there are people that have half a brain, they don't know any better. Okay, which some of them, no question. If there are people that know better, if there are people that let, the class I went in, it was, it's top, top classes there, had people say, oh, it's, and someone wanted to say something or whatever. Say, oh, it's too bad God didn't kill all of you. Isn't that anti-Semitic? That's pretty anti-Semitic for a 15-year-old to say, 16-year-old to say, right? So obviously, no matter how intelligent a person is, didn't we say a few weeks ago that it's really what they believe? You can't say, oh, that was a slip of the tongue. First of all, the person I'm thinking of who said it, that wasn't a slip of the tongue. And they never said it was a slip of the tongue. Nope. Right? So that's something obviously they believed. Certainly they believed. Or as someone said, someone who is, I guess, more religious, as a non-Jew, and they said, of course you deserve all the Holocaust and everything else. What do you want? You killed our Savior. Of course you deserve it. Right? So it's not like these things weren't said. I'm not saying it happened every day, right? But it definitely happened. It definitely happened. And we're not talking about skinheads over here. We're talking about people that had more than half a brain. Certainly had more than half a brain. Some of them didn't. Drugs killed them. But some of them, some of them were quite intelligent. Probably more intelligent than me. I'll give credit to where it's supposed to be, but doesn't mean underlying, in their heart of hearts, what do they think about Jews? They don't like Jews, even though there aren't too many Jews, even if you're not religious, right? So that, what do you want to say? That doesn't exist? Of course it exists, right? It certainly still exists, right? It's still out there. We need more of it? I don't think we need more of it. I think people haven't had enough time identifying with Judaism, and if they're going to be made fun of and, be bullied, and all that, doesn't it, they're not even going to know why they're being, why they're being persecuted. right? They absolutely have no idea. Is that going to want to become more Jewish? Some people, yes. Some people that say, I'll go out of my way to be more Jewish. You want to say that? I'll go out of my way to be more Jewish. Other people will shrink in their seats and they'll say, why are they saying this? I have no connection to Judaism anyway. It's no big deal, right? Just like, Mr. Edelman, get back to Mr. Edelman, gonna have a Shabbat dinner. You don't even know what Shabbat is, for goodness sake. And you're gonna have this guy say, oh yeah, I love Jews now. I don't think that's gonna happen, right? I don't believe it's gonna happen because you have nothing to offer him. You have nothing to offer Jewishly. You have nothing to offer Jewishly. He still believes that. It might have been a slip of the tongue, but obviously that's not the case because it's still there. Right now comes along the Mishnah, which we'll probably never see. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, chapter 6. See, we're still chapter 2, Mishnah 5, part 10, because I don't think we're gonna have a part 11, maybe. Right? That's the way it looks right now. But what does it say in Pirkei Avos, chapter 6, Mishnah 2? It tells us every day a heavenly voice goes on from Mount Choreb, proclaiming and saying, woe to them, to the people, because of their insult to the Torah. Insult to the Torah. What's the insult to the Torah? They don't learn. They don't learn. Now, a person's going to ask, okay, we're going to get to the Mishnah probably when I'm about 85, right? But whatever, one day we'll get there.
Yay, we'll get there.
And that is that this is a tremendous wonder. Why? Because what does it mean? There's a heavenly voice that says this. We don't hear it. I mean, last time I checked, my ears are pretty good, even though I listened to a lot of, loud music when I was younger. But, my ears are still good. I don't hear the voice. Most people don't hear the voice, right? So what's it talking about? So it comes along the Sefer Haredim. Book hasn't been translated. In chapter 73. Not even sure when it was written, a few hundred years ago, I think, or more, that it was written. What does it mean over here? It means that a heavenly voice awakens us to attach ourselves to God. In other words, there's something out there, even though we don't necessarily hear it, but maybe it's something from within that wants us to be in contact with our soul. Being in contact with our soul means that we attach ourselves to God. We want to do the right thing. We want to live the right way. That's why, obviously non-Jews want to know what they're obligated in, etc. What are we supposed to do? Right? But only to those who want. Now, this is an interesting thing. Who's going to hear the voice? Right? Who's going to want to hear the voice? Comes on the Sefer Haredim. The Sefer Haredim says the ones that want to hear rebuke. See, that's why you're all here, so I can slaughter all of you. They will
I'm not there yet.
hear
I'm not
that
there
heavenly
yet.
voice and to awaken themselves to holiness. So therefore, if we're in tune with our service to God, we're going to understand this and get the message. Now, let's backtrack. Right? What does the Sefer Haredim here say? He says that someone who's going to get the message, we might be all excited, want to do the right thing. We get stopped by the evil inclination. We go here, we go there, we waste time, all these different things. Right? But a person has to realize, you know what? You think you're so great. We're going to see, we're going to see in the Mishnah coming up that the Mishnah says you learned a lot of Torah. You think you're God's gift to the world. Isn't that what you were created to do? Right? As a Jew. Right? A person going to say, well, look, I had an 18-year-old once tell me, 18-year-old guy learning yeshiva says, Rabbi, I don't want to hear the Musar. I'm not interested in the ethics. I'm holding better than 95% of world Jewry. That's what he said. Right? I'm holding better than 95% of world Jewry. I want you to cut me some slack. So I told him, I said, okay, let's say what you're saying is true, which I don't think, but let's say I agree. Right? I'll be in a generous mood. I'll agree. Problem is, what if God doesn't agree? What if God thinks you have higher potential? Right? So I was giving this class. Someone says, well, if I keep kosher and I keep Shabbos, am I good? Right? Then someone says, what if I hold according to this, kashrus organizations? No, he's going to die. Right? He's over. He's finished. But what if we have higher potential? What if we have higher potential? You read any book of Musar, any book of ethics, it makes you feel like a piece of dirt. It makes you feel like I have so much more to grow. I have so many things I do wrong. right? It's not there necessarily to break you. It's there to realize we have many levels we can grow, right? Many different things. If a person does not want to hear the words of rebuke and they want to just say, no, you can desecrate Shabbos, you can be a homosexual, it's okay, God's going to forgive you, God loves everyone, we're going to play the guitar, we're going to sing Kumbaya, everything is beautiful. No, because the Torah tells me, beyond the shadow of a doubt, now it's in my Bible, it's in everyone's Bible, even if it's mistranslated Bible, right, like your King James Bible, it's still going to be there. There's reward and punishment. God says, if you do the right thing, everything's good. If you do the wrong thing, there's going to be payback, right? So there's a right way to do things, a wrong way to do things. So the Karaites will say, nah, can't listen to the rabbis. Come on, we're all the trolls. Can't listen to the rabbis. They're adding or subtracting to the Torah. No such thing. Okay, right? But when it comes to these type of things, am I willing to listen, to understand, no matter how good I am, no matter how much I know, what's the person going to brag, right? I could brag and say, yeah, I've gone through almost, all the Talmud, got a few more tractates left, I'm working hard. So that makes me better than everybody else, right? Makes me more knowledgeable, maybe, right? But if I got, if I was conceited and I was arrogant, I thought I was God gifts to the world, I'd stick up my nose and say, oh, come on, you guys can't even read Hebrew, right? You guys can't, you guys don't even know algebra. You want to learn calculus? You don't have algebra over here, right? You want to ask a question where you haven't even read the Bible from cover to cover. You don't know the Midrashim. You don't have half the knowledge, a quarter of the knowledge. Well, like, what are you going to give to me, right? Of course, the person can have that kind of ego, not me, right? Someone could have that kind of ego and look down on someone else. But what does the Mishnah say? Right, we're going to go into great detail on this. What does the Mishnah over there say in Ethics of Our Fathers? The Mishnah over there says, why are you bragging? Why are you arrogant? That's what you were commanded to do. Right, but not only that, you're only scratching at the surface. There is so much to learn. Right, there's so much to learn over here. If that's the case, then what are you bragging about? Right, now, what could happen? What could happen? A person with no knowledge, and this is where it gets dicey, right? This is where it gets dicey a little bit. Someone with no knowledge could start saying, I don't believe this. You really think this happened? And you get a little bit defensive. And you say, listen, you've never learned anything. You've never, you can't even read Hebrew. Why in the world, right? Why in the world should I even entertain your question? Right? I shouldn't even entertain your question over here. I'm doing you a favor. Right? I'm doing you a favor by even listening. Why? Very simple, because you don't have the knowledge. So what could you do? You could knock somebody off by saying, you have absolutely nothing to say over here, right? And the reason is because you don't have the knowledge. Now, they could look at you and say, like who are you? Just because I haven't learned doesn't mean my opinion is invalid. Oh, haven't we heard that? Haven't we heard that? Everybody and their mother has an opinion about things they don't know anything about. All right, someone says, yeah, I read this article, Wikipedia, about physics. Stephen Hawking, you're out. Einstein,
I researched on Google,
out.
Yeah.
Right, Rabbi Dr. Google, right? When it comes to physics, comes to mathematics, no one's got that kind of chutzpah. Nobody. I don't care who they are. They don't have that kind of knowledge. I don't care if they're a genius. They don't have that kind of knowledge by reading one article. All of a sudden, something gets in their mind, and they think, oh, how could the Torah be true? I'm a feminist, and it's against feminism. It's against. Okay, so let's understand, what's the role, of a Jewish woman. Let's see how it fits. No, I'm a feminist. This is my world outlook. That's my agenda. Oh, I get it. Okay, so you've been brainwashed by society. Let's look at the text. Let's see what it says. Let's try and understand it. Again, so they think something not based in reality. Why do I say it's not based in reality? Because they make all kinds of statements that aren't true. If it's not true, then what is my obligation over here? What is my obligation over here to listen? Right? I have no obligation to listen. I'll do you a courtesy. right? I absolutely do a courtesy, to listen, but I don't have an obligation. You're talking fluff. You're talking out of your elbow. And I'm going to be nice. Because I'm not going to curse, right? In other words, you're arguing with somebody, let's just say, has a PhD in Judaism. Doesn't mean they know everything, right? Doesn't mean they know everything,
No,
right? But you have a first grade education. If you have a first grade education, you want to ask a question. Questions we love. Agendas are a different issue, right? That's by the Haggadah last week when we read the Haggadah, and I say every year, part of my Passover Seder, says by the Russia, by the evil son. There are 4 sons, right? There's a wise son, a wicked son, right? Son doesn't know how to ask, and someone, a simple son, right? So the wise son and the evil son ask the same question. They basically ask a similar question. The only question is perspective, right? The wise son wants the answer. The evil son, not only you don't give him an answer, but you tell him, had you been there, you wouldn't have been redeemed, right? So most people know I'll do whatever I can, help Jews come back to Judaism, help non-Jews, etc. But this Jew is asking a good question. One, he gave an answer. This one, what do we do? We blunt his teeth. What do you mean you blunt his teeth? What about drawing him closer? Why not bring him close? That's what our obligation is. Somebody like this, you cannot bring close. Why not? He's not asking a question. When someone has an agenda and they think, I think Judaism discriminates against women, right? So, Dan the man, what's your answer going to be? You say, I'll say what Rabbi Coffman says. Oh, right? And they say, I think Judaism is against homosexuals, right? What is Dan the man going to answer? Oh, right? I think, okay. So they keep coming back with either the same thing or different things, right? And what's your answer? Your answer always is going to be, oh. Why? Because they're not asking a question. I think does not mean they're asking a question, right? Now, so person would say, why do you keep saying, oh? I think because you didn't ask a question. You're giving your biased opinion. You're not asking a question. If I were to say, I think Judaism discriminates against women because of this and that, what would you say? That's a question. That's a legitimate question. But if you have an agenda and you say, I asked this question, I asked this question about where was God during the Holocaust, say, I got a great book. It's called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. Unbelievable book. You want to read it? They say, no. I just asked the question to rabbis because it makes them fidget. Okay. So that means you're wasting my time. I can watch the hair I don't have in my head grow, even though it is growing a little bit, right? I can say, you're wasting my time.
I'm due for a haircut myself.
You're not interested in an answer. If you're not interested in an answer, I can't answer an answer. Right? That is essentially what's going on. Someone has an agenda and someone says, well, you can, it's not my way of thinking. It's not on my radar. You can never convince me. I'm never going to ever be convinced. So of course you're never going to be convinced because you're not interested in looking at the question. If you're married to a non-Jew and you're going to say, okay, my whole life has been a travesty of a mockery of a sham, right? A Jew being married to a non-Jew. Of course you're not going to look into it. That makes perfect sense because then you're delegitimized, right? If you would just admit that, I wouldn't have an issue, right? But if you're going to say it has no relevance to my life, I got a million ways where it would. I'm not listening, right? Now, if you're in a debating team, you get an F. You'd lose. That's not a debate. You have to bring proof. Show me proof where the Torah is not true, right? But if you have an agenda and a person says, I'm not going to listen, so over here, I don't have to give an answer, right? A person may think, and especially on social media, I'll just hop on this for a second, right? On social media, a person may think, God's being defamed over here, and, I got to fight for God, etc. God doesn't need you to fight his battles, right? God can fight his battles by himself. People get caught up, and they say things.
Emotional drama, yeah.
I have to fight for God. Now, most likely, a person's going to get into discussion, right? If the person has an agenda, right, which most people do, if they have an agenda, they're not interested in what you have to say. They could care less. You could drop dead. They don't care what you have to say. And they'll hide behind fake names and anonymous and this, whatever, but they're not interested in an answer. They're not saying, that's the answer. Imagine if Elie Wiesel was still alive. And he'd say, I got at least 4 answers why the Holocaust happened. And Elie Wiesel's going to say, That's the reason why the Holocaust was, okay, no more books. I'm not going to write my books, right? Again, I'm not going to pick on Elie Wiesel, right? And all the horrific things that he went through the Holocaust. We can't judge that. We cannot judge that, right? But if someone has an agenda in general, you are never going to change that, right? Now, I may over the last couple years, right? I may have convinced you that the CFL is a Bush league, right? You may actually even admit it, right? You might even admit it, maybe not to me, maybe to others, right? But that's only if a person has their mind open. If they don't have their mind open, then what's going to happen is they're not going to be able to listen, right? So now someone's going to ask me, what does that have to do with anything? How in the world did you get to this topic? So what does the Sefer Haredim over here say? See, there's always a connection somehow, right? We're always able to connect it. I don't know how God does it. It's an absolute miracle, right? What does the Sefer Haredim say? And I'm going to quote it again. Only those who want to hear the words of rebuke, they're going to merit to hear the heavenly voice. They're going to get awakened to want to do God's will.
Wow.
If they don't want, and that's why people are here, because they want to hear what I'm going to say. They want to hear these words of rebuke to say, I got to be better. I got to strive better. I have to see deeper meanings.
I'm not quite there yet.
But it takes a long time to get through to people. Okay, 2 hours is nothing. It takes years. It could take years, but the point is you have to be able to want to hear. If you don't want to hear, even if the words are hard, and I've taken things on the chin. My Rebbe's hammered me, a few times, and he told me that I'm not afraid. If I think you're out of line, I will tell you. Now, those are love taps. Why? Because that means somebody cares. That means they want to help you. That means they want to put you in the right direction. They're not just putting you down to put you down. The whole point of Musar books are not necessarily to destroy a person where they're never going to learn, where they're never going to want to do the right thing, and they're just going to be broken. They have to understand what they're doing. They have to understand their goals. They have to understand what they're here for in the world. So therefore, if a person's willing to hear, that, yeah, they do make mistakes. Yeah, that they may not be consistent. Yeah, that they may have a lot to work on. It doesn't mean, right? It doesn't mean, okay, I am going to hide. I'm going to put my head like an ostrich in the water, in a hole, and I'm going to say, okay, woe to me. I'm not going to be able to do anything, right? They have to understand, okay, I make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but we have to try and minimize that and make a plan how we're not going to do it. Just because you weren't consistent today doesn't mean, what's going to be tomorrow, but you have to make it real enough to understand, what did I do today? What did I accomplish? What did I fail at, right? That's what we do before we go to sleep. Before our head hits the pillow, did I do what God wanted me to do? Didn't I do it? How did I interact with others, with family, etc.? For a Jew, did they pray? Did they do mitzvahs? The list goes on. So when you make that type of, you make that type of cheshbon, that type of analysis, right, of what we've done, you may not want to wake up the next day. You may say, God, I've had it. I'm throwing in the towel. Kill me now. Just take me now so I don't do anything more wrong. Right? Now, that could be part of our attitude. God doesn't want that. He wants you to struggle. Right? He wants you to overcome the struggle. And God put us in this world exactly to do that. Now, sometimes we're more successful. Sometimes we're less successful. But God does not, and this is an important thing, God does not put us in a situation we can't handle. Now, we may think we cannot handle it. We may think I got a big hole in my head or other things, and God's going to say, well, what's going to be? We don't know, and all that, but we have the ability. We have the ability to overcome. Now, I've spoken a number of times, things happen in my own life because I want to make it more real. And I grew up, more or less like everybody else, even though, I didn't grow up as a Christian or, whatever. But, I wouldn't be able to give chizuk, give strength and different things if I myself had not gone through it. Now, there are great people that, they're, Rav Simcha Wasserman, a blessed memory, was the son of Rav Elchanan, Shem Yikam Damo, that God should avenge his blood, who was the head of the yeshiva of Baranovich and was killed in World War II. Rabbi Kiva Tatz was a major student of Simcha Wasserman, and he asked him once, how could you be such an expert, in child rearing, you never had kids? Right? So Simcha answered him, because I saw how my parents interacted. In understanding how my parents interacted, that made me, now I understand how to deal with kids, even though I never had kids. Now, in general, so why do I mention that story? Because if a person never had kids, how can he explain to someone else? How can he explain a kid throws a tantrum, a kid goes through this, teenagers, right? A different creation altogether, right? And I have 5 girls. So imagine, right? So imagine what I've gone through over the years. So that's why my hair's a little bit white, different ways. But the point, I don't want to digress here. The point is with all that, someone, if they've never gone through it, it's very hard to explain to somebody who's going through it, right? So a lot of stories I've told about myself because I've actually gone through it. Now, I'm not saying I was always successful, right? And how to handle certain things. But I would have thought, I would have thought in certain things that it was so hard. Certain things were so hard to go through. And it could be one of the reasons to go through it is be able to tell others and give them strength for going through it. There are obviously probably myriad other reasons, as well. Not only does that make it, I would say it makes it more real, but at the same time, it's someone who has a connection and says, yeah, I also went through it. I was also part of it, and it's, if I didn't go through it, yeah, I could also give certain advice, etc. But it's not exactly the same as someone who actually went through it. So here, I guess, as we're winding down here, wait a minute, you had something to say before? You had a comment before?
Well, yeah, I mean, you were really going on about people that have an agenda, and I think you more or less summed things up. People also have a purpose. And I think that when people start pushing an agenda, life has a tendency to give them some of the slaps upside the head to correct this or that, to get them back on track for that purpose. But I think the way you're explaining things really shows a fine line between somebody who's walking with an agenda when they shouldn't have one versus walking towards the purpose and the potential.
I think, though, if a person speaks to somebody, I think it's relatively easy to know, if they have an agenda or they're just blowing, they're really empathizing. They really have a legitimate question, because you have to strip away the layers, right, in order to understand if someone's asking just to agitate you or someone's asking because they're really, interested, in the answer. And, just give one example, I know, a few people that are asked certain questions and I have about 5 seconds to give an answer. Because I know if I go beyond 5 seconds,
you're going to get barraged with more questions.
Listen, and they're probably not going to listen to the answer anyway. They're going to say, "Oh, that's interesting," But I know they're not really.
But what about? But what about? But what about?
Because they are interested, right? They are interested, in an answer. So I have to be very good within like 10 seconds. 5 seconds is too little, to try and at least explain it in some way. They're going to understand it, and then you just move on. Because really, it's not going to affect them in any way. They're like, "Oh, that's interesting," and then they move on, right? So, that's something a person has. That's something a person has to know. When someone asks the question, what is behind what they ask, right? And once it's really an agenda question, then there are different ways you can answer it. But that they're not interested in an answer, right? So you can give a snappy answer, right? So, as I always mention, if somebody asks you, isn't circumcision barbaric? You say, no, barbarians don't do it. Because they're not interested in an answer, right? Now, if they are really interested in an answer, okay. If you don't know the answer, you say, listen, let me get back to you. It's a good question and whatever. So you're being honest. Doesn't mean there's no answer, right? Just you don't know the answer right now. Or it could be a myriad of answers or whatever. Maybe they don't like the answer. They want another answer. Doesn't really matter. But you have to see where the question comes from. Right? If it's something you can answer, it's one thing. If it's something they have an agenda, there's no answer you'll ever give. Right? And I've seen it many, many times. They'll just say, I don't like this answer. Okay, I'll give you another answer. No, I don't like this answer. They have an agenda. Right? They're not really interested in an answer. Okay? I had someone last week.
Rabbi, I had to share this week with a younger Noahide because they have a tendency to ask the question, and it almost seems like they have an agenda like you're talking about, and you give them the answer, you do the best you can, and then what do? They go to another source, ask the same question, go at it the same way, then they go to another person, another rabbi, ask this person, ask that person. It's I keep wondering why some people are looking for something.
I will tell you, I get that also, and there is, somebody asked me, questions for a long time, and I just stopped answering them. And the reason is because first of all, they show disrespect. And second of all, I mean, not that I have such broad shoulders, but to say, wow, this other rabbi says this, so why are you asking me? Right? In other words, yeah, there are different opinions, so why are you asking me? In other words, if you come to ask a question, which we've spoken about, but if you come to ask, let's say it's a halachic question, and someone's coming here to ask the halachic question, that means they want the answer. I had somebody once, somebody asked me about a certain name, and I said, no, I don't think you should use that name for a lot of different reasons. And they said, I like this name, this is who I am, and that's what I'm going to use. Okay? Okay, am I going to answer that person back? I'm not going to answer the person back. I mean, I will answer them back for other things, but not for this. Because they weren't interested in the opinion. Okay, so why ask? If you want to just take a bunch of opinions and keep it to yourself, it's one thing. Right? But if you ask a rabbi a question and say, well, this other rabbi disagrees. Okay, so why are you asking? If you're, if you tell them, I heard
already had your own.
Some
your own
rabbis
opinion,
say like this, what's your opinion?
Yep.
Do you hold like this or not? Okay, then you know what they're doing. But if they ask you the question without saying that, and then they come back and say, wow, there are other opinions, so what are you asking for?
Exactly.
Right? I think that's a little bit obnoxious, like you're saying. And I had somebody, last week, a few weeks ago, ask basically the same question, just a little bit different way. And I already answered the question. So I said, I was very nice.
Well, they didn't hear the answer the first time.
So I gave it a second time, and then they asked me a third time, and I gave them the same answer. And I said, this is it. This is the answer, and it's okay. And that was it. They didn't after the third time, they didn't ask. Because I just said, point blank, all these type of questions you're going to ask, it's all the same answer. Okay, so it could be that person a little bit thick in the head. Maybe.
Well, right? Rabbi, I got to wind this down because I got another class coming up, but maybe you can give us a quick summary. I mean, it's beautiful. It sounds like we're going for a part 11 of chapter 2, Mishnah 5.
Yeah, there is going to be part 11. We might actually be able to finish it next week.
I'm taking away from this. See. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I got to learn to say that more often. I'm not quite there yet, but I can make steps towards.
There's a lot there. There's definitely, it's definitely still, quite a bit. Speak about. I guess in winding down, we'll say like this, that the most important thing, as we said at the beginning, is having fixed times to learn, right? Again, that'll apply to Jews, not the non-Jews. Certainly good for non-Jews to learn every day. I don't think there's any question about that. Learning never goes to waste. Or as I would say, propaganda never goes to waste. But a person should never push off learning. Because if you push off learning, then you may never learn, right? And that's really the point, because
can't get the time back.
Say a person is ever going to be free. Because we have all kinds of things. We have all kinds of things that we get carried away. We get, CFL, baseball season just starting, Toronto, come on. You got Toronto over there, right? So you got baseball starting, these other things. We get carried away. We get, God made this world, a big distraction. So we have to get out of the distraction and do what we need to do, because a person can't say, well, I'll do it tomorrow, right? We'll be like, as we said at the beginning, we'll be like Wimpy, give me a hamburger today, tomorrow, whatever, right? You can't say that because you don't know what tomorrow will bring, right? And if a person pushes it off, God will say, oh, he's not really that serious. They're not really that serious. So you know what? I'll put this in their way. I'll put that in their way, and then you won't be able to learn. And that you don't want.
Get off, yeah.
And that
Stuck
you don't
in a
want.
rut.
Right.
Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid. I mean, I hope people learn to mount up with wings like an eagle.
So as King Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 1, you don't know what will happen today.
Right.
Beautiful
verse.
That's a good way to end, because we don't know what's going to be. We don't know what's going to be today. We don't know what's going to be tomorrow. You have to take the bull by the horns, because you might not have tomorrow. Tomorrow, something else going to happen. Tomorrow, next day, something else. And God can just make the spiral go on and on because you caused it. It
I know the feeling, Rabbi, year after year after year after year.
You weren't serious, and by not being serious, God's going to say, fine, I'll let these other things happen. You'll be too busy. And then that's it. Then you're going to see weeks go by and say, hey, what happened to learning? I want to get back to learning. I want to get back into a groove. And that's how people get out of it because of one thing. Then it's the second thing. Then it snowballs. It's very easy. It's very easy for that to happen. You have to be determined, beyond the shadow of a doubt. And this has to be the most important thing in your life, to learn, to practice and all that and put it into, and put all these things into practice. Because if you don't do it, it won't get done.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much, Rabbi. It's a joy to be back with you. We missed you last week. I'm sure you had a wonderful Passover. Are we on for next week, Hashem willing, same time?
We are on part 11. Baby, we're going to keep going.
There's got to be something in there for me. I know it.
Feet in your head than others. So we're gonna keep plugging. I can't promise that we're not going to finish. It looks like very well we could finish. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. But as Dan the Man always says, you can't go wrong with ethics.
You can't
no matter
go
how
wrong
many
with ethics.
times we go through the fifth Mishnah, 11, 12, 15, I don't think we'll get to 15. Right?
Oh, I'm sure you could have done 10 parts on every
can't
segment.
Go wrong with ethics.
Yeah. Okay, folks, so we're going to sign off because I got another class coming up in about 20 minutes or so. If you want, stick around. It's going to be great. Feel free to like this, share it on social media. Check Rabbi Coffman out on his website, orthodoxconversion.com. He's always doing wonderful things on Tanakh Talk when they're live, and I love that controversial issues. He's always coming up with some unique points. So like everything he does out there, and don't be shy to support him. So till next week, folks, we're going to sign off. Have a great day.